Welcome to this talk which I'm giving on behalf of the Friends of Nottinghamshire Archives as part of the Phonobite series. My name is June and I'd like to tell you about two brothers, Clarence and Doug, my father and my uncle. At the beginning of World War II, Clarence was 20 and Doug was 18, so both were likely to be called up pretty soon. The boys had been brought up in a railway family near a busy marshalling yard near Nottingham. As children they were taken to the local Brethren church, but after some falling out within the church, they went to the Church of Christ. Clarence was to remain in this church until his death in 2001. The Church of Christ was known as a pacifist church, so the boys were brought up with these principles. Clarence was soon called up, but had decided, with help from members of his church and the meetings he attended at the Quaker Meeting House, that he would refuse to fight. He was therefore called to a tribunal in Nottingham held on the 10th of February 1940. Before he appeared, he had to write a statement giving his reasons. Clarence based his on religious reasons. I have been brought up to believe that everything I do should be done as Christ would have done it. Christ would never kill a man. He taught us to love our enemies as we love ourselves. Human life is sacred to God who gave it, and only He has the right to take it. His reasons were accepted, and Clarence applied to join the Friends Ambulance Unit, a Quaker organisation. He was accepted and started training in Birmingham in August 1940. Clarence was immediately sent to London after his training, living in the London Hospital in Whitechapel with other unit members. Their work was to help when there was an air raid, taking supplies such as bandages and medicines, carrying stretchers and helping in air raid shelters. Once Clarence was given the task of helping in an operating theatre, but his aim was to join the China convoy. Clarence's younger brother Doug had been called up in May 1941 and by mid-1942 was sent to North Africa as a driver in the RASC. Soon after this date, we have letters sent to Clarence and other family members by Doug, and from these we can trace Doug's time during the war. Although the two brothers had made very different decisions, they respected these choices and remained close. This closeness and support is obvious in letters from other family members too. Finally, on Sunday 8th of November 1942, Clarence and other unit members of the China convoy set sail from Liverpool on the Strategist. They stopped in Brazil and spent Christmas at sea, almost in Durban. We have Clarence's diary he kept giving a detailed account of the voyage. They must have felt very lucky, as the next unit members to set out were torpedoed and lost. They arrived in India in January 1943 and then travelled by train to Calcutta. Clarence was to have journeyed further to China but was hospitalised with stomach trouble and was left behind. He recovered and was asked to stay in Calcutta for a while as Assistant India Agent for the China convoy, but his aim was to get to China. Meanwhile, Doug was driving in the desert during a time of fierce fighting. Out in the desert, just you and a few lorries. There, after a hard day's work, sweaty and dirty, with sand in your hair, eyes and mouth, this hangs like a cloud over a convoy on the move. Then a cup of tea, brewed in a sooty old tin over a drop of petrol in a petrol tin cut down. Never do you know what good stuff tea is till you've been thirsty for hours. Then we would strip off and have a good rub down, from water in an improvised wash bowl cut from a petrol tin usually. Then we would sit and gas till the tea gong went. Here I must tell you that at midday we had a light meal of tea, biscuits and bully, or sardines and cheese. Then when it was cool in the evening, dinner, usually bully stew, that's a desert speciality, or meat with a few vegetables cooked but requiring a few minutes in hot water. Then a sweet of rice or stewed fruit, often tinned fruit. Then after dinner we would get the back of the canopy down and also beds down. Me and my mate would be there. and often another driver who had no canopy on his truck. The inspection light would be plugged into the truck battery, careful shaders so as not to show from the top. There we would read for a bit, or talk, or write our letters. Then out came the primus stove for a brew-up and supper of sausage or bacon and eggs. In July 1943, Clarence received an airgraph from Michael Cadbury back in England. He must have been devastated when he read that his mother had died suddenly in May at the age of 53. Around the same time, he received a letter from Doug, who had heard the news earlier. Doug was able to fill in a few more details and tell Clarence about the funeral. Because of the problem with getting post in India, he received a letter from his mother on the 21st of July, 2 months after her death. Doug was in Italy towards the end of 1943 and described it in his letters. "I'm now priding myself on my being a driver. You have to be good on these roads, as even with my little Dodge it takes full lock to scrape round the hairpin bend. The road is mostly a cutting of the side of a mountain with a sheer drop at the edge. Somewhat put up a notice, a slip and you've had it. Very appropriate this is, as if you go over once you'll never do it again. By the way, we've got our Africa Stars, that is the ribbons. Soon we will get our 8th Army clasps. Boy, will we look smashing then." On the 11th of January 1944, he said, "We are giving Jerry hell now. We cannot get him running, but we are hurting his strength much more than if he was not wasting his best men trying to hold us. The good old 8th will show him when they get firm ground instead of mud and snow to stand on." He talked about Italian girls. "People say Italian girls are very pretty. This is so. In fact, they are of the type which at 30 are ugly and gross. And even though I am not a saint and look upon an hour spent with a pretty girl of any nationality as not wasted, I am still level-headed enough to see that a union between two races would only lead to unhappiness on both sides of the tie. As no Italian would fit in any English home, neither could an Englishman find things to his taste as these people live here." Clarence was finally able to go to China in August 1944 and arrived after a rough flight. He was based in Kunming and helped to organise the transport of goods, medical supplies and people. In April 1945 he wrote, "5 new lads turned up from England on Monday, and this morning I saw them off on the train to Kut Sing. Our car was out of action, so we had a chain of 6 rickshaws to carry the luggage to the station. Each of the men coming in now brings £150 of baggage. They are all quite young, being 19 to 22 or so. There is still one man of this party to turn up. He is positively the last reinforcement from England. Every party that comes from home these days is the last. Today we went out and brought in another 5 Canadian Dodge trucks. I am now getting used to driving these trucks and have done a bit of driving in the town. It is lovely to get in and drive a new vehicle. We hope to use some of these new trucks in the famine area of Kwai Chow and to run them on liquid fuel. I was convoy leader today." Later, some of these lorries were converted to run on charcoal. Driving in China, though, was dangerous. At one point, we saw a truck go over the edge. We were climbing the hill and the other truck was coming down towards us, obviously with his engine switched off to save fuel. We pulled right into the side to let him pass, but in spite of that, he scraped the side of our first truck and then, after he had passed, plunged off the road and down the bank. Luckily, the truck had no cargo and no passengers, and the driver and his mate crawled out unhurt 50 yards or so below the road level. The driver obviously lost control and jerked the steering wheel to avoid our truck he had already scraped. There is so much more to this story, but it cannot be told in a short talk. By the end of 1946, both brothers were home, Clarence having travelled home via America. If you'd like to know more about this story or phone her, have a look at our website or Facebook page or email us.